In ancient societies stretching from the river valleys of Mesopotamia and Egypt through the Mediterranean world of Greece and Rome, the requirement to make choices under conditions of incomplete knowledge generated a range of structured practices. These approaches allowed individuals and groups to act when the outcomes of different courses remained uncertain. They operated without the mathematical formalization of probability or expected value that would appear many centuries later. Instead, decision-making rested on the observation of recurring patterns, the refinement of experience over generations, the interpretation of signs within established traditions, and the use of institutional procedures that rendered indeterminate situations into forms that supported coordinated action. These frameworks varied by region, but shared an emphasis on constraint as a means of stabilizing choice. This is before logic, a history of rules before they were written. One of the most detailed surviving systems comes from ancient Mesopotamia. Over many centuries, scholars and diviners compiled large collections of omen tablets recording associations between observable phenomena and possible future events. These included celestial observations, animal behavior, unusual births, and the condition of sacrificial livers. When a decision of consequence was required, specialists consulted these standardized references to identify correspondences that might indicate the likely character of an outcome. The system presented signs as conditional rather than deterministic, often allowing accompanying ritual actions intended to address unfavorable indications. The authority rested on accumulated consistency across recorded cases. Parallel traditions existed in Egypt, where officials responsible for irrigation, construction, and grain storage developed procedural records based on repeated observations of Nile flood patterns, seasonal labor availability, and material constraints. These records supported coordinated adjustment within recognized environmental limits, even when exact future conditions could not be known in advance. Greek and Roman contexts employed a broader array of methods. Oracular sanctuaries received inquiries framed as alternative actions. Responses, preserved in inscriptions and accounts, were often concise and matched the structure of the question. In Rome, augurs interpreted signs from birds and other natural phenomena before public assemblies and military expeditions. Selection by lot provided a mechanical means of resolving certain appointments. Individuals consulted seers, interpreted dreams, or cast dice. These practices coexisted with philosophical reflection. Aristotle described phronesis, practical wisdom, as the intellectual virtue that permitted effective deliberation in contingent situations. It combined perception of relevant particulars, recall of past experience, and alignment of action with the appropriate good. Stoic thought stressed the distinction between what lay within and beyond one's control, while Epicurean reasoning evaluated choices in terms of pleasure and pain. Legal codes and customs supplied templates for recurring situations such as disputes and agreements. These practices reorganized uncertainty into bounded forms that permitted action to proceed. Divinatory consultation displaced uncertainty from personal judgment to catalogued signs interpreted through long tradition, often facilitating social consensus in collective decisions. The cultivation of practical wisdom through repeated engagement with real situations enabled analogical reasoning in new contexts without exhaustive analysis. Institutional requirements, such as mandatory consultation of omens before major undertakings, embedded decision steps within repeatable sequences that maintained continuity across changes in leadership. In agriculture, trade and household management, reliance on seasonal indicators, reputational knowledge, and precedent-derived heuristics supported choices where variables such as weather or market conditions remained partly unknowable. Across these approaches, the common thread was the reduction of open indeterminacy to constrained forms that permitted sustained activity. The historical sources available for reconstructing these practices are inevitably partial. Textual and archaeological evidence tends to illuminate elite and state-level contexts more fully than ordinary rural or household decision-making. Scholarly analysis continues to debate the degree to which participants treated divinatory results as literally predictive versus pragmatically useful, the extent of reinterpretation when signs conflicted, and the relative balance between ritual and empirical judgment in different periods. Many accounts were composed after events had unfolded, raising questions about retrospective rationalization. The frequency with which structured methods were bypassed in favor of immediate judgment is difficult to determine with confidence. These gaps require acknowledgement of the limits of the surviving record. Taken together, these constrained decision practices supported the long-term functioning of complex societies. They facilitated governance across large territories, the organization of long-distance trade, the conduct of military campaigns, and the maintenance of legal and cultural continuity despite persistent unknowns. By embedding choice within interpretive traditions, experiential judgment, and procedural safeguards, they reduce the risk of paralysis in the face of uncertainty and helped transmit effective patterns of response from one generation to the next. The distinctions they drew between domains open to human intervention and those governed by larger patterns formed part of the conceptual foundation for later systematic reasoning about contingency. These frameworks showed that structured constraint could render action sustainable under persistent unknowns. In the next episode, we will examine identity over time through the example of the ship of Theseus.